The new Relight Effect here in DaVinci Resolve 18.5 is awesome, guys. Those were just two examples of little things that I came up with just to try out the tool and see how it works. And I gotta be honest, I'm pretty impressed with how well it does. So today we're gonna talk about the Relight tool. I'll show you how I created those two samples you saw in the beginning there. I'm gonna talk about some of the different knobs, buttons, and dials there within the effect, how we kind of set it up in the color page, how you can use keyframes to bring that effect in, take it out, how we can also use the magic mask to kind of isolate subjects that we may want to apply the relighting effect to. We're going to cover a bunch of different things here. I think you guys will find it helpful just to kind of help get you up to speed with this effect, see how it works, see how I used it, and maybe get some ideas flowing in your head on how you might use this in some of your videos. Now, real quick, this is a studio-only feature, so if you have the free version, you're not going to see it in there. It is only in the studio version of 18.5, which is currently in beta as of this recording. I'm sure it'll be out pretty soon in the full release, but for now, it's in beta. A couple other things to keep in mind when you're working with this effect in DaVinci Resolve. It's going to be pretty taxing on your computer. Now, I just did a few small clips here, and I'm on a M1 Mac Mini with 16 gigs of RAM, and it does take a while for this effect to process and just kind of put the effect on the clip so that I can see it. So keep that in mind. If you don't have a powerful computer, it's probably going to take a little while. Even on my Mac 1 Mini here, it does take a while for this effect to kind of process and load up. So keep that in mind. It's not a quick thing, at least for me in my setup. Another thing to keep in mind is that this effect does not create brand new light. Well, it does kind of in a sense, but it's going to take the light that you already have in your scene, and it's going to use that as well as creating a depth map to kind of enhance and work with the light that you might already have in your video. For example, if I turn off my key light like this, the Relight tool is not going to relight the entire scene for me and do a good job because there's no light lighting me up to start with, right? And my camera might not catch the detail that it needs in, my face and seeing me on camera. But the Relight tool can help take some of that light that's already in your clip and change the direction of it, move it around, change the way that it looks in your scene, add color, take away color. You can tweak what's already there and enhance what's already there if that's what you want to do. But if you have no light to start with, kind of like this, you're not going to be able to just take this tool and, magically relight your scene. So that's something to keep in mind. So let's just jump into Resolve. We're going to take a look at the effects, how we created them on the samples in the beginning there, talk about all the different button sliders and everything available to you in these effects. Also, I'm going to give you some tips and tricks along the way. So I think you guys will find this stuff helpful. Let's jump into the Relight tool here in DaVinci Resolve 18.5. Let's go. So jumping into Resolve here, we are going to work with that UFO clip that you saw first, and we're going to create that lighting effect that moves across the screen that simulates the UFO flying across the sky while I'm looking at it. So I've got my clip in my timeline. I'm in the edit page right now, but to create this effect and add it onto our clip, we need to jump over into the color page. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into color. Now, once we're in the color page, you do have a few ways that you can set up this effect. You can use just one node. But at this point, Blackmagic recommends that you use two nodes. One node to do the heavy lifting of creating the depth map, and the second node to actually create and sculpt the lighting to get the effect you want for the light itself. Now, this is going to just help make the processing on your computer a little bit easier. You can do it in one node, but I think you need a pretty strong machine to get that to work smoothly. And even with two nodes here on my M1 Mac Mini, it is a little sluggish and it's a little slow, okay? So keep that in mind. This is a really intensive process for your computer to compute and do in Resolve here. So the first way that you can do it is by creating just one node, like I mentioned. You can Option or Alt S and add in a second node there. Now, if you were going to use just one node, you would then come up to your effects library, scroll down until you find Relight. Go ahead and drag and drop that onto your node. Now, the way we're going to do it in this example is to use two nodes so that that first node can do the heavy lifting, like I already mentioned. So I'm going to select my first corrector node. I'm going to go ahead, Option or Alt S, add in another corrector node. And I'm just going to bring this guy down over here. Another way to add the node is just to right-click, Add Node, Corrector right there. So now you need to hook up these nodes in a specific order. We want to grab our output from our node number 1, connect it to the first input of our node number 3. And then we also need to have our output from node number 1 coming to the input of node number 2. Then we want to take the output from node number 2 and connect it to the second input of node number 3, just like this. So this is what your node structure should look like in order to use the Relight effect. So on our second node, this is where we're going to do the heavy lifting of creating the depth map. So grab your Relight effect and drop it onto that corrector node number 2. So once you have everything connected properly, this is what your node tree should look like for this effect. But there are a few things that we need to modify on these 2 nodes before we get started. So click on node number 2 here. Then we want to come into our settings, and you've got a bunch of options in here, but the thing we want to change is this right here, output surface map. You want to make sure that this is checked on. And what that's going to do is say, okay, in this node, create the surface map and output it, send it out. So send it the surface map out of this output right here, which is going to go into our corrector node number 3. So heavy lifting gets done right here, and our lighting effects get applied right here. So once you've checked this on, your node number 2 is basically good to go. You can kind of leave it as it is. You do have an advanced options there, but I haven't changed that. I just left that at the default settings. So click on your node number 3, and now we need to make an important change here to the effect that's applied to this particular node. And that is under surface map. So again, your settings, relight, surface map. We don't want to use the internal on this one. We want to select this and use input number 2 because it's saying, hey, take that heavy lifting you did and just use that because it's already done. We don't need to do it twice. So now we should be set up pretty good. And you can see in our preview window over here, we kind of see what that depth map is looking like. Just to run over some of the other tools here real quick, we have options of how we can have this light affect our particular clip. So you've got point source, which is what it's on right now. And if we look over here, you see I can click my light and drag it. And depending on where I move my light, it's going to take a second. It'll re-render the scene. And we can see how the light is affecting the depth map, right? We can see what's happening there. Now I can uncheck this right here, relighting map preview, but since I haven't made any changes to the light itself, we may not see anything if I turn it off. So you can see it just looks like the regular image, right? So for now, I'm going to turn this back on just so we can see how these different lighting effects are going to affect our image based on the depth map that was already created. So we've got directional right here. You can select directional, and that's going to create a light source that emits light from a specific direction at an indefinite distance, right? And with each one of these, you can come in here and you do have the option to kind of change how some of these look. You can see as I move this around, right? We can see what's happening. And what do you notice, right? We can see we can actually make our light move across the screen, which is what we're going to do to create that UFO effect. And then you've also got spotlight here, and that is going to be like a spotlight, you know, on your image coming from a certain direction and a certain distance. You can adjust the cone shape if you want and kind of just change the way that that light looks. And if you see in the viewer here, this is what it looks like. I can move it over and you can click the top of it. You can stretch it out, make it brighter and less bright, change the shape of that cone if you want. You've got options on how you can create that light and how you want it to look. So for this example, we're going to come up here and we are going to use directional. Now moving down below that, you've got light properties. You can adjust the brightness, the reach on some of the tools here is how far away is that light. You can adjust the contrast between the light and the dark, the lights and the darks in your clip there. You've got surface properties. You can adjust the glossiness, right? So how does the light interact with the surfaces? And what does that reflection look like? So by adjusting this, it's going to change what that reflection looks like. And you can see the preview over there. It's kind of dulling it or making it brighter. You can affect the shadow softness. Is it going to be, the effect going to be a little more harder in the shadows? Is it going to be a little bit softer? You can adjust that however you'd like. You've got the light direction here, so you can adjust your X and your Y coordinates so we can have that light move, which is what we're going to do with this to simulate that UFO flying over top of me while I'm looking up at the sky. And then you've got a few other options here in input surface map. And what they do real quick, the right here, rescale over saturation is good for certain applications. You can use different methods and colors to create a surface map. If you import your surface map and it doesn't appear correct, you can check this on to reinterpret it and kind of change the back end of what's going on and how it's kind of figuring things out. You've got reinterpret left and right. You can check this box. Swap the direction of your external surface if your map surfaces are appearing concave instead of convex. And I'm just reading these so you guys know what they do here. But you can reinterpret the up and down right here. And if you turn that on, it's going to swap the direction of the external map if your map surfaces are appearing lit from below when the light should be above them. So you can play with those different options if the light isn't looking correct or you want to try and tweak things and change things around a little bit. All right, so we have the light set up. Now, how do we change the way that light looks? So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to uncheck this Relight Map Preview. And again, I'm doing all this on our third corrector node, so keep that in mind, that's important. So right now, the image on the screen here in my viewer, it just looks normal, right? So in order to change the lighting effects, what we want to do is come down and use any of our color tools, right? In this case, I'm going to use the primary color wheels to make some adjustments. So let's say I want to brighten up the exposure a little bit. So I'm going to come down, grab my offset here, and I'm going to drag this guy way up, see if we can see the change here. And it may take a second or two for it to render. It usually does for me on my machine here. It's not that quick. So if your machine is more powerful, it will probably go quicker. But for me, it takes a little bit of time. I'm also going to come and grab the gain, and I'm just going to boost this guy way up so we can start to see some changes here. And now you can see on the preview here what's happening. The highlights there are getting brighter, and we can see that the new Relight effect is having an effect on our image. Now you can essentially go through and adjust the light however you want using any of the color tools here. One of the things that I did was I came in and for the gain, I just pushed it way up towards red, right? So that it's got this weird iridescent red look to it, right? And you can change it however you want. You know, you can adjust things. Maybe we want to make the shadows looking cooler too. Gives it this kind of look, right? A little different than the example there, but you get the idea here, right? And then if we take this and we move it through the image, you can see it looks a little weird. All right, maybe it ain't great, but you get the idea that our lighting is now going to move around the scene if we want it to. So maybe if I put the lift back where it was, I'm going to reset the color on the offset, and we'll just keep the color on our gain here so that we're just affecting like the brighter parts of the image. Maybe adjust our gamma a little bit there, add some more color in there. Now let's say I like this, I think it's a cool look, but I want this to start here and I want it to move across the scene, right? Maybe I even want it to flash back and forth, right? That could be kind of cool. How do we do that? In order to make that happen with our light, we are going to add in some simple keyframes, and it's really not as hard as you think. So on our corrector node, you want to make sure you've got your keyframes open right here. So make sure you got the keyframes open. Corrector node number 3 right here. Now you can expand this guy and select just the items that you want. You can do that. I'm just going to select all of them for right now, just to make it easy. So let's say that I'm going to start with my light on the right. I'm going to come into my settings, and under light direction, I'm going to go ahead and add a keyframe. I'm just going to wiggle it a little bit so that way, we make sure a keyframe gets set and I can see it down here. Now I'm going to come ahead a little bit. Let's say I come ahead to there, and I'm just going to drag my light and drag it over. And because we already set a keyframe, it's going to automatically set another keyframe for us. We don't actually have to click any buttons. So now if I move ahead a little bit more, wait a second, I'm going to drag my light back, and we're going to have it kind of flash back and forth here for us. Move ahead a little bit more, bring the light back over, and you can see in our keyframes here, it's setting keyframes for us as we move that light around. And I'm just going to do that a few times, and now we've got our keyframes made. So now if I play through the clip, here's what that looks like, and keep in mind, it may take some time for Resolve to render this up. It's a very intense process, and for me, in my experience here in testing it out, it does take a little while for that to render up so that it'll work. But check it out. Here's what it looks like. And if I click on this little effects right here, I'm just going to turn it off so we don't see it on the screen. Here's what it looks like. So you get the idea of what that's kind of looking like. But let's say I want that light to like fade in. I don't want it to just all of a sudden magically be blasting in there. How can I have this light, come on and then turn off? Again, we're going to use keyframes to do that, and it's pretty easy. Since I selected all of my keyframes on our corrector node number 3, once you're at the beginning of your clip, you want to come to the key section and key output. Now, I'm on my corrector node number 3, and that's where you want to be to do this. So I am going to drop this all the way down to 0. And now you can see there's no lighting effect applied on my clip. And since I have all of my keyframes selected here in my corrector number 3 by clicking this first one right here, the automatic keyframing, we're going to be able to just move our playhead ahead a little bit, let's say here, and now I want it to be at 100%. So I'm going to come back to my gain, and I am going to click 1, hit enter, and then it's going to add in a keyframe for us down here in our color corrector under the defocus section. So then let's say we get to the end here, and maybe right about here, I'm going to add another keyframe. So I'm just going to wiggle that, make it number 1 again. It's going to add in a keyframe for us, and then I'm going to go ahead a few frames and drop this key output again back down to 0. So now we have our light turning on, fading in, moving back and forth, and then fading out at the end of our clip. And here's what that looks like. So pretty cool and pretty easy to get this light to move around and do some stuff, right? So it's not so bad. You guys can do that. You totally got that part. Now let's take it up a little notch here and let's do something else that is gonna isolate this lighting to just me in the frame. So let's say we want to take our magic mask and we want to create a mask that will, limit where that light effect is falling. So in order to do that, I'm going to actually come to my first node right here. And in here, I want to create a magic mask. So I'm going to come down here to the magic mask, select my plus, I'm going to select person right here, and I'm just going to select myself. Draw a little line on myself like that. Give it a second because, again, a lot of this stuff takes a lot of power for your machine to work with it. So once it gets, me selected there, I'm going to go ahead and track it. And then I'll show you what to do next. So go ahead and hit track forwards and backwards and track your subject. And one tip to help your track, you can turn off those two relight nodes just to help your track work a little bit easier and a little bit quicker here. So I'm going to come back in my clip. I am going to turn on the mask just so I can see what it's looking like. And I'd say, yeah, that looks pretty good. So once we have our magic mask created with our subject properly masked there, in our first node, all we have to do is take our alpha output, and we're going to go ahead and connect that up to our corrector node number 3. And what that's going to say is, hey, when you get to using the lighting effect, only use it on the part that's masked out. So if I go ahead and turn these back on, I'm going to turn off our selection there so we can see what it is. I'm going to turn that off. And now when we look at our image here, you can see that we are only affecting me, right? We're not affecting the surrounding areas. It's only affecting me. And if I play through it, here's what that looks like. So you can see it faded out there a little bit onto everything else, but you get the idea. This is how you can create a mask, right? A magic mask, or even just a regular mask using a power window, and then pipe that into your lighting corrector, right? Your relight node number 3 there, and only affects certain areas of your particular clip there. So that comes in real handy when you really want to be specific about how that light is interacting with your clip. And if you want to, use power windows to kind of direct the sections of your clip where that light will be affecting. So while not a hard effect to work with here, it does take time to use it because it is so intensive on your machine. It takes a lot of processing power. And like I mentioned already, on my M1 Mac Mini, it takes a while for this effect to kind of generate things and make changes. It's not a fast moving thing. You just got to sit and wait a lot. But I'm sure that'll get better over time. And if I had a more powerful machine, it would be a whole lot easier to use here and work with in the color tab in DaVinci Resolve 18.5. And if you're curious about the second example clip that you saw, there was no extra light there. It looked like I clicked it on. I didn't. I just held my remote control and I just went like that. And I created the effect using the Relight tool or the Relight effect here in the color tab. So if you look at that, you can see, again, here's my setup. I do have 2 nodes. I've got the depth map on node number 2. On node number 3, I made my corrections, changing the way that the light looks. And then I also use keyframes down here, like we already talked about, to turn that light on and off when it looked like I was clicking my remote control. So again, here's what that looks like, and you can see it as it goes across the keyframes here. Just trying to relight my studio shot. Now, again, if you don't have any light to begin with, it's not gonna light me up when I'm dark, right? But it will take the light that's available, create those depth maps, and be able to modify the light based on what's available in your clip that it can use. So here's what that looks like, and check it out. And you can see if I just change to my Open Effects overlay here, you can see the kind of light that I used. It was a spotlight, and I just pulled it way out to the right, and that's how I just really blasted a whole lot of light in there. And I kind of overdid it just for, dramatic purposes so you guys can see it a little bit clearer. Obviously, you'd probably want to be a little more subtle with a lot of these tools and really make it, blend in and fit with the image. Obviously, I went a little overhanded here just to kind of get the point across and show you guys what it looks like and how it works and what it's doing, just to make it a little bit clearer. But you definitely want to blend it in and finesse things a little bit more so that way your shots look the best that they can. So there you have it, the Relight tool here in 18.5, guys. How are you going to use this tool? Drop your ideas in the comments down below. I'd love to see some videos, drop some links if you guys have tried this and you think you came up with something kind of cool, you like the way the lighting effect works. drop it down in the comments below. I'd love to go and check it out and just see how you guys are going to use this tool. All right, guys, with that said, I'm getting back into Resolve here because there's a lot more stuff to get to in 18.5. So much to look at and not enough time in the day. So with that said, guys, I will see you in the next video. Peace.